Standard & Poor's now downgraded Macedonia. So the previous grade was BB, now it is BB minus. So what does this grade, what do these grades mean? Especially what does BB minus means now, since that is the grade Macedonia has right now. Is it good, is it bad, or is it somewhere in between?
Generally speaking, there are three types of countries. Those who are what we call investment grade. Countries where investing in these countries is safe, the money is likely, your profits are likely to be easily converted and repatriated, and in general present reasonable growth prospects and a stable macro and microeconomic environment. These countries usually have A, AAA, AA minus, AA, AA plus, etc., a variance of A. Countries with less than BBB are considered non-investment grade countries. So BB plus, BB and BB minus are at the upper part of the non-investment grade countries. Countries whose external indebtedness is growing, whose growth prospects are dubious, whose public finances are not under control, and who have arrears, problems with internal markets, non-productive investment, etc., etc. So, in the short term, investing in these countries might be feasible, but there are serious risks in the long term. All these ratings, from BB plus to BB minus, indicate problematic investment environments.
Yes, but now we have BB minus. The next grade, the next lower grade would be B plus. That would be even worse, I would imagine.
Of course.
What do grades that have only one B mean?
B plus, B and B minus mean that the risks are now both in the long term, but also in the short term.
So we should be very careful not to enter in that lower category.
If you move into the B category, B plus, B and B minus, you will find it extremely difficult to borrow abroad, to refinance your debt, to issue Eurobonds, to borrow money from banks, and to attract foreign investors.
So lately, I mean, last 15 months, the major indicators of the Macedonian economy were not very good. The GDP is stagnant last couple of years. The industrial production was up until 2 months ago was falling for 17 months straight. The number of workers in the industry fell 15 months straight. The revenue service reports that in 2012 the revenues from VAT were down 9%. This quarter's the revenues from VAT are down 24%. So I suppose that all this data, all these circumstances, economic circumstances, played a big role that Standard & Poor's decided to downgrade the country.
They played a role, not a big role. Standard & Poor's are actually much more worried about public finances. They do say that the growth prospects of Macedonia have diminished considerably, mainly because of contagion from the Eurozone crisis. And because the European Union is the main export market of Macedonia, when there is contraction in the Eurozone, obviously Macedonia will be affected via the vector of exports. But they don't regard the diminishing growth as the major problem. They regard public finances as the major problem. They say that public finances are completely out of control, there is a lack of transparency, there is investment in non-productive projects and enterprises, there is a misallocation of resources, and so on and so forth. So they are mainly worried about issues of governance. They are worried that the current account deficit is growing. They are worried that Macedonia's external indebtedness has grown and will grow considerably, etc., etc. So their main criticism revolves around governance issues, government issues, public finance, and Macedonia's eligibility for EU accession in view of its geopolitical problems and internal problems with the opposition. So there is a strong political element in the report, which is totally legitimate, by the way. I saw that the Minister of Finance criticized Standard & Poor's for mentioning it, but every credit rating agency must take into account the country's inner political stability and how this inner political stability will affect or might affect its integration with larger economic regions and its ability to transact business abroad and its ability to attract foreign investors. So if you take all this into account, the picture is of lack of transparency, lack of proper governance, misallocation of resources, and declining public revenues, which might push the government again into a situation of arrears. Now, the last time the government had arrears, they amounted to 2% of GDP, and the government had to borrow abroad short-term commercial loans, which are very expensive, in order to pay arrears, mainly VAT arrears to large corporations. Should this happen again, the government's ability to access foreign borrowing might be more limited because of the downgrade, and additionally, the government's access to domestic borrowing will have to increase. So we saw, for instance, that the government increased its domestic borrowing from 60 million euros to 280 million euros last year. So there is a whole situation of increasing indebtedness, which is where the money is going only, you run in order to stay in place. The money is going only for maintenance and non-productive purposes, and they are very worried about that.
Yeah. Now we have a kind of a bit of strange situation with Macedonia's credit rating. Now, since Standard & Poor's downgraded Macedonia to BB minus, but on the other hand, Fitch still has this credit rating which is BB plus. Moody, unfortunately, is not rating Macedonia, but now between Fitch and Standard & Poor's, there are two levels.
Two ranks. Yeah.
Two ranks. Mm-hmm. So Fitch is next up to rate Macedonia. So what do you think? Will they follow Standard & Poor's or will they hold their own position?
First of all, it's important to understand that Fitch has been paid by the government of Macedonia to issue its report. And this, I have no doubt, influences the outcomes of its reporting. Generally, it is known that Fitch gets paid by governments and that its reports are very optimistic usually when it comes to sovereign risk. Standard & Poor's, on the other hand, usually gets paid by buyers of bonds or underwriters of bonds, which is an entirely different ballgame. Fitch will have to follow suit, not to a full extent. I don't believe that Fitch will downgrade Macedonia by 2 ranks, but it may downgrade Macedonia by 1 rank. By its own admission in the report in October 2012, Fitch says that if certain conditions will be met and fulfilled, Macedonia will be downgraded, and many of these conditions have been fulfilled. Fitch, in its October 2012 report, got all its predictions, without a single exception, wrong. It predicted wrongly the current account deficit, the budget deficit, the growth of Macedonia's economy. You name it, they got it wrong. And they said at the end of the report, if we got any of these wrong, we're going to downgrade Macedonia. So you don't have to be a big prophet to understand that they're going to do that.
Yeah, okay. Standard & Poor's also measures the so-called DNC, meaning transferability and convertibility of profits, meaning can they be converted into hard currency and taken out of the country. So Macedonia received a downgrade on this field too. Can you explain what this means?
The TNC index, the transferability and convertibility index, measures the likelihood of a foreign investor being able to convert his profits into foreign exchange and take them out of the country completely freely. Each country receives the TNC rating, exactly like a credit rating. The credit rating rates the bonds of the government of the country, and the TNC rates its convertibility and transferability. So Macedonia's TNC has been downgraded as well. To my mind, that is an even worse development than the downgrading of the credit rating, because the credit rating affects Macedonia's ability to issue Eurobonds and sell them in the international markets. That is a very small part of Macedonia's economy still. However, the TNC affects the decisions made by foreign investors directly, because if foreign investors cannot convert their profits and cannot take them out of the country, they will be afraid to come here. And if they're afraid to come here, the economy is doomed. Everything from unemployment to ability to service external debt, you name it, it'll be in trouble. the TNC, what the downgrade of Macedonia's TNC signals to foreign investors, this country is much less safe as far as your money. You may not be able to convert it in due time. You may not be able to take it out. Now, I have no idea why Standard & Poor's downgraded Macedonia's TNC, because Macedonia's foreign exchange reserves are more than adequate. Its banking system is actually the most well-funded in Europe. It has a capital ratio of 17%.
100%, yeah.
And tier 1 capital ratio of 14%. I cannot see any reason for this, but it still remains a fact that they have done that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vaclin.
Thank you. You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.